Have you ever noticed how different Korean and Japanese sound? I mean, really listened. Think about a K-pop rap verse versus a traditional Japanese song. One feels tight, sharp, kind of punchy. The other is so flowing and stretched out. Why is that? Why do two countries, right next to each other, have such wildly different rhythms in their art? Well, we're going to dive into that because the answer is a pretty amazing linguistic detective story. So it really boils down to this: compression versus expansion. On one side, you have the Korean rhythm, which is all about being short, defined, and packing a lot into a small space. And on the other, you have the Japanese rhythm, which is elongated, open, and flowing. You can hear it right away. But that's the what, not the why. So why does this huge sonic difference even exist? That's the real puzzle we're here to solve. So what's the secret? You might think it's just about culture or different artistic tastes, but it's actually something much deeper. The answer is literally hidden in the physics of the languages themselves. It all comes down to one tiny fundamental rule: how you're allowed to end a sound. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty and crack this syllable code. We're going to look at the absolute basic building blocks of these languages. And you're about to see how this one tiny difference creates a massive ripple effect that ends up shaping entire art forms. Okay, first up, Korean. The Korean language is built on what linguists call closed syllables. The best way to think about this is like closing a door. A syllable that ends with a hard consonant sound, like a K or an M or a T, is closed. The sound is stopped, it's locked off. It has a very clear, sharp ending. And the reason Korean can do this is because it has this incredibly rich system of final consonants, called Batchim, that it can use to slam that door shut on a syllable. This lets the language pack a ton of information into a single, short sound. And that's where that compressed, punchy feeling comes from. Now let's jump over to Japanese. It's the complete opposite. Japanese is an open syllable language. This means pretty much every single syllable has to end in a soft vowel sound. An a, I, u, e, or o. The sound is never locked off. It's left open, kind of hanging in the air. Now, there is one, and only one, exception to this rule. It's the consonant n, which is an n sound. This one little sound is the only consonant allowed to end a syllable in Japanese. And it's a real workhorse. It has to handle all the nasal sounds like N, M, and even NG. But literally everything else, it has to end in a vowel, no exceptions. And this right here is where you really see the consequences. Let's take the word for mountain. In Korean, it's one short closed syllable, sun, simple. But in Japanese, since you can't end with that N sound, unless it's the special n, it has to expand into two open syllables, Yama. Same thing for river. The single syllable gong in Korean becomes kawa. The only time they match up is with that special N sound, where the Korean bam can become the Japanese ban. Almost every other time, Japanese just needs more syllables to say the exact same thing. So what happens when a language that's not built to end with consonants tries to pronounce a sound that does? Well, that brings us to our second big clue, a kind of linguistic rule we can call the law of expansion. And this is really the key. Because a Japanese speaker's language doesn't allow them to just stop on a hard T or K sound, their mouth physically has to open up and release that consonant with a vowel. It's almost like a built-in release valve that's forced to turn one sound into two. Let's just walk through an example to make it super clear. So step 1, you start with the Korean word for field, which is but, one single closed syllable. Got it? Okay. Step 2, a Japanese speaker tries to say this, but their language has no final T sound. The sound is basically blocked. So, step 3, what's the solution? To release that trapped pressure, they have to add a vowel. And the result, step 4, is that the sound expands. But one syllable becomes hata, two syllables. And I really want to stress this part. This is not an artistic choice. It's not a stylistic preference. It is a physical, mechanical requirement that is baked right into the sound system of the Japanese language. The sound literally has to expand. All right, so we've got the basics down. Closed syllables versus open syllables, compression versus expansion. Now for the really cool part, let's see how this one tiny rule goes on to completely define the rhythm of poetry and music in both cultures. Just look at this. Here we have two lines from ancient poems, both saying the exact same thing. going to the field in the mountain. The Korean version does it in just 4 syllables. But the Japanese version, because of that law of expansion we just talked about, needs 7 syllables to get the same idea across. Same meaning, but a totally different musicality, a totally different rhythm. And believe me, this isn't just a one-off example. This is the rule across the board. If you look at traditional Korean poetry, like Sijo, it's very often built on these tight meters of 3 or 4 syllables per phrase. But Japanese poetry, from the ancient manyoshu all the way to the modern haiku, is famously built on meters of 5 and 7 syllables. The syllable count is literally inflated by the structure of the language itself. So here it is. Here's the big revelation. That iconic 5-7-5 rhythm of a haiku, it's not just some beautiful artistic tradition that somebody made up. It's actually the minimum number of syllables physically required for the Japanese language to express a complete thought. The rhythm wasn't a choice, it was a linguistic necessity. And of course, this linguistic DNA shapes the music too. It has to. Korean pansori singing can have these really sharp, almost percussive breaks because the closed syllables create natural, abrupt stops. But in contrast, Japanese enka has those famously long, flowing, drawn-out melodies. Why? Well, it needs to accommodate all those open vowel endings. In fact, that signature vibrato you hear in enka, called kobushi, is really just a beautiful, artistic solution to a linguistic problem. What do you do with a vowel sound that just has to hang there in the air? So what does all this really mean? I think it goes a lot deeper than just language rules. It's really about the fundamental breath and rhythm of an entire culture's expression. At the heart of it all, you have these 2 completely opposing forces. The Korean rhythm is defined by compression and brevity. It's the art of packing the most meaning into the shortest possible sound. And the Japanese rhythm is defined by expansion and flow, the art of letting sounds linger, connect, and resonate. You could almost say that the syllable structure of a language dictates the physical length of breath of its art. Think about it, the short, sharp exhalation of a Korean sigil poem versus the long, sustained breath of a Japanese enka melody. It all comes from the same source. So, if we were to boil it all down, it's this. Korean sound is built on an aesthetic of information density. How much can we say, how quickly? And Japanese sound is built on an aesthetic of lingering resonance. How beautifully can we let a sound fade? They're 2 totally different sonic worlds, and it all started from one tiny rule about how to end a syllable. Which kind of leaves us with one last thought. If the basic physics of a language can have such a profound, deep impact on its art and its music, what secret rhythm is hiding in the syllables of your own native tongue? What's the hidden beat in the way you speak every day?